Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. The Disability Legislation Project is an initiative of the Human Rights Committee of the Law Association that aims to partner with the disability community to advocate for the enactment of national disability legislation. Now, former principal of the Immortelle Children Center, current president of the Consortium of Disability Organizations, and possibly most importantly, parent of a person with an intellectual disability, Jacqui Leotaud, she joins us now to discuss the work being done. Thank you so much for making the time, ma'am. And it seems sometimes as though there are situations that we see, but why nobody dealing with it? And then the answer is, well, okay, well, you deal with it. So I want to start off in terms of like some of the biggest gaps that you see from your vantage point that you're trying to address with the consultations that we'll speak about in a little bit. Thanks.
Well, Dike, thank you for inviting me to be part of your show and for me to be able to talk about this initiative, which I'm very excited about. I've been involved in disability for, of course, over 30 years. And it's wonderful to see that maybe all of our work of all the different organizations and people who have been working for many years will come to fruition in disability legislation. Because, as you know, if you have no laws, if you have no legislation, you really have no legs to stand on. You're just hoping for persons to be nice.
And that is something that I want to get to. I was going to get to it a little later, but I want to get to it now, thank you. In terms of you have skin in the game as a professional and as a parent, because you're trained in special education, and
right.
So that is academia. Looking at your professional work that you have done, and as a parent, I want you to speak to the difference, thank you, that a national policy to facilitate people with disabilities will be versus having that support circle, and operational circles that you would have physically built out for your specific instance.
Well, I mean, over the years, things have changed, but unless you have laws to help you, you are just dependent on the goodness of people. So like for my daughter, when she was young, there were no schools available for her. She couldn't go to the regular school system. When she was little, even the preschools wouldn't take her. And so you had to look for other avenues. So eventually, I mean, I just opened my own school, and then I got involved with the Immortelle. Things have changed over the years, slowly, and so now we still don't have an inclusive system, which is something that is part of our push for for persons with disabilities, especially kids who need to be with their peers. If they're in a school for other kids with special needs, then they don't have a peer group with typical kids. So this committee, I feel, will be very important for all our persons with disabilities and for all of the needs that we have. Healthcare has always been an issue. I mean, you take your kid who has a disability into one of into the hospitals, any of the healthcare facilities, and it's difficult because a kid with autism just can't cope with sitting down and waiting, and they're not facilitated in most places. I'm not saying there are not some people who are lovely and try to facilitate it, but it's not there, it's not in law, so you can't go back and say, listen, I need to make the government needs to put this in place because it's not a law. So yeah, so we need to, that's why this project I feel is so important.
And you say that, and I have memories because you talk about someone with who's autistic not being able to sit waiting for to be attended to for how many hours. I remember there was a day that someone broke my leg for me. They were kind enough to do so, but the difference between myself and someone else who came in on the same evening was that the ambulance brought me in. So they saw to me quicker. The other
Right.
person actually was holding his foot and hopping, and he was waiting to be attended to. So even before you go to persons with or people with disabilities, I think even that level of inclusivity, and I also appreciate what it is you're saying. It's not as though they're not very kind persons who are able to facilitate as they are able to, but that still speaks to more persons and personalities than the overall process or procedure that is in place to make sure that certain things happen. But in terms of the legislation, though, correct me if I'm wrong, the three things that you're looking at are Equal Opportunities Act, the Education Act, and Mental Health Act, and I think the Immigration Act is somewhere inside that as well. What are kind of tweaks that you're looking at? And are those the pieces of legislation that you looking at specifically?
We as a committee did not look at those 4 pieces of legislation. We had to look at all the legislation that is available. Those were the 4 pieces that have the most, that talk about disability the most. And they just do not, I mean, the Equal Opportunities Act we found was the one that really was had the most support for persons with disability, but really they could really do very, very little for us. So disability legislation became really important. The Education Act is so it's really old, and it does not really deal with education that is new and innovative. And they don't even talk about inclusive education. The Education Act really needs to be updated and changed to keep to join the new age, you know. And so I think a lot of the time the acts at their in their day were fine, but 20 or 30 years later they do not facilitate persons with disabilities. And because now the rights of persons with disabilities have been put in a treaty, we need to be able to go to these laws and legislations and make sure that the rights of persons with disabilities are not being, are being addressed. Because in the Education Act, I mean, I would say that it needs a whole different change to be able to be covering the rights of kids with disabilities. And the language in it needs to be changed as well. Nobody says the words that are in the Education Act now. The Mental Health Act needs to be changed. There are some good things, but it all needs to be updated. And I think that when you look at all these acts and legislation, pieces of legislation, they really do not cover the rights of persons with disabilities.
And on that, we take a short break. We will continue speaking specifically now to the Disability Legislation Project when we return. We are speaking with President of the Consortium of Disability Organizations, Jacqui Leotaud. Stay with us. We come back after this. Welcome back. Dike Rostant here. In depth, we are speaking to the laws or the legislation that needs to be amended to match pace with our evolution as a society, and we are doing so with President of the Consortium of Disability Organizations, Jacqui Leotaud, and looking at the Disability Legislation Project. Now, there are different things that are taking place. One of them, Ms. Leotaud, is these consultations. So speak to the consultations specifically, thanks. What do you hope to get out of them? How do you go forward after you've had them?
Well, this project was in three parts. So we all met, and then we have the video series that we talk about legislation and how we look at it, and the rights of persons with disabilities. And now we have three stakeholder conferences is what they are. It's so that persons who have a stake in the disability legislation, whether they're parents, persons with disabilities, just interested parties, teachers, anyone who really is interested in the rights of persons with disabilities and the legislation can come to the conferences and express their opinion. Just so you know that we are not developing the legislation. We are suggesting and trying to support the legislation that is being developed by the ministry. We are trying to work with the ministry to ensure that whatever legislation is brought to the government is of the covers all of the interest groups and all of the suggestions and ideas that persons in the disability community express.
But how important is it that you get that insider knowledge that goes into policy development, that goes into dealing with the legislation? Because I think sometimes when you don't have that knowledge, it's so easy to have oversights. And then sometimes things have progressed so much that it's harder to kind of backtrack. Like you tell people, people will tell you that it's so much easier to build a house from scratch sometimes than refurbish or retrofit it. But and even like having the stakeholders at the conference, people with disabilities as well, speaking and advocating for themselves, their guardians, and the people around them. How important is that to you?
It is important for themselves. You must get persons with disabilities and advocates for persons with disabilities involved in every process for anything to do with persons with disabilities. It's an international saying, nothing about us without us. So you need persons with disabilities to talk about what they want. Because unless you are a person with a disability, you really do not look at the needs the same as persons without disabilities. A parent of a person with a disability, unless you're a parent or a grandparent or somebody who has a stake in being part of a family with a disability, you do not know how it affects your life. And so, therefore, they must have their opinion and they must be able to share what they would like to see in any type of disability legislation. And so, it is important that they come to the conferences, and if they can't come, that they send in their opinions and their statements. There is a email that they can send their, I hope I have it here, that persons can, oh, which was, I don't know, Dike, did you,
I think
do
we're
you have
looking for it,
that?
and we'll also post that when we are sharing this conversation.
Yeah.
But
And the next conference is, of course, in Hillview College on Saturday, the 2nd of December, from 2 to 5. It's not a hybrid conference. It is face to face. So you need to come out and give your opinion, tell everyone how you feel, and so we can incorporate it in our brief to the government and the ministry on what we feel needs to be in that legislation.
And thank you for that. I want to ask though, sometimes it feels as though it can kind of be chicken or egg situation in terms
Sorry?
of, sometimes it feels as though it can be a chicken or egg situation in terms of collecting quote unquote disability data. Because it seems as though individuals would have persons in their charge not coming out as much because there are things that are not as inclusive. But at the same time, you want to get information to help ameliorate that situation. But which one goes in front of the other? Does it happen at the same time? What's your take on that?
I think that we just have to keep working because there are kids out there, persons out there who stay home and do not become part of this process. So yeah, I mean, there's little we can do if they do not have access to 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 to, to computers to send in the information. So it's difficult for us to reach everybody, and that is a concern. I would say, how does one reach all of those persons who won't come out and find it difficult? I mean, it's not that they don't want to be part of. It's just sometimes their life and the environment and their whole lifestyle and community just doesn't allow them to be part of this process. So we have to take them into consideration, and hopefully, with once a lot of different disabilities are represented, then the laws for each disability and for all of the different needs, the health, the education, the accessibility, the communication, all of those, once all of those are addressed, it should impact on even those who did not make it to the conferences. This is what the hope would be.
Okay. And in the final minute and a half we have, well, just over a minute, what form will the conference take in terms of like what can people look out for rather when they visit Hillview College from 2 to 5 on the 2nd?
They have a great program actually. We have a presentation about law and disability and the rights of persons with disabilities. There's a question and answer session. There is a session with a panel talking about what disability rights means to you, and there's group discussions on everything that was said. So it is what we're trying to do is to ensure that it is very interactive, with an introduction about all of the different the treaty on the disability rights.
All right, and thank you so much for that, Jacqui Leotaud, President of the Consortium of Disability Organizations, speaking to the Disability Legislation Project. Please go out, please let your voice be heard, advocate for yourself or your loved ones. And on behalf of TTT News, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth with me. Thank you so much for joining us.